I said, this is the third lecture, and thank you all for coming out on a Saturday at 3 o'clock when 75 is all jacked up, right? All right, so, yeah, this beginning, some of the first lecture was about Black Art on Change, which was about post-colonialism, how to get past the Western ideal for us, if you will. The second lecture was about the origins of modern art, which is African art and Picasso appropriating a lot of African art. And this third lecture is now on the nostalgic commodification of Black art in America. All right, so let's get into it. What are we talking about? We're talking about this imagery, this iconography that is still with us. Why is this still with us? Why is this still with us? What's its function? What's its use? Can this be changed? Right? But before we actually look at this icon, let's look at where a lot of the stereotypes come from in relation to indigenous peoples. Right? Really, when we're talking about the Renaissance and Da Vinci, we all know this Vitruvian man, right? And from the second lecture, we kind of talked about this a little bit, where the Vitruvian man is really an example of perfect proportions, perfect symmetry, perfect geometry, right? So this is showing you the specimen of perfect man. That's what you're looking at when you see the circle. Man is a perfect circle and a perfect square, right? So this is where we get the golden ratio, the ideas of what beauty is, right? So when you define what beauty is, you automatically go to the binary, which is what isn't beautiful, what isn't perfect, right? So this sets up Petrus Camper, who's, if you don't know, he's one of the first scientists and really considered to be the father of science, right? And he goes around and he does these anatomical studies, and he's drawing orangutans, and he's basically going out to prove perfection, and he's documenting, right? So in this perfection, in this geometry, we now get the setup or the rules to look at evolution, if you will. Right? So he came up with this facial angle theory that basically, because of the angle of the Negro face skull, he is closer to, or she is closer to the ape versus the more evolved European, right? So how does this, so yes, so we have, this spawns a whole bunch of things. It spawns phrenology, it spawns a lot of different pseudosciences that say that Asians were related to alligators or whatever, right? Pseudoscience, a lot of it has been debunked, but a lot of these theories are still implanted, still carried around, right? So much so that if you don't know, in 2011, Dr. Kanazawa came out with this scientific study as to why Black women are ugly, right? So when it came out, it was like, oh, this is a shock, and it was like, oh, where does this come from? Where does this come from? It didn't go anywhere. It was always here. Once you have this definition of perfection, once you have this ideal, then yes, this is where it's going to go. This is what it is, right? So continuing on from the Renaissance, the Renaissance really comes, the ideals of the Renaissance and humanism, right, really splits between Romanticism and Neoclassicism. Neoclassicism, right, promise we'll get to the commodification soon, right? But you kind of need to understand this, right? So neoclassicism basically uses that geometry, furthers that geometry of the Greeks, right? And basically shows you how to be a man, right? So this is Napoleon. Can we turn the lights down a little bit? So this is Napoleon on his horse, right? Perfectly still, spine perfectly straight, right? You see that? Now when we look at the horse, what do we see? You see that wild-eyed gasping? You see the hair flowing of the tail? This is one of the perfect representations of neoclassicism, which means man must be master of nature. Man must be emotionless, stern, strict, should not give in to his emotions. Man should choke his emotion and tell his emotion what to do, basically, right? So that's where the geometry leads to. So we get a lot of these symbols, these phallic symbols, in neoclassicism. Right? We have man, male, female, phallus, chalice. Right? So every time that you see this, this is more of a man that you can be. Be more man. Right? So neoclassicism is all about this manhood. It's all about rising to the challenge, using reason, using science, using your own will to perfect yourself, cutting out God, leaving emotion behind, not letting emotion dictate how you operate. So the typical logic male, those archetypes were set up right here in neoclassicism. So here, phallus, 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 boy. How do we know this is a boy, right? The women, see this line right here? Are the women in this conversation at all? No, right? They're comatose. Do they even have their eyes open? No. Mouth closed, right? How do we know that this is a boy? Eyes is open. So here we have 3 generations of men. Men go to war and, either die on your sword or come back a champion. This is where we begin this type of dialogue. So here, all of this is staged, by the way. This is stories from the Greek that neoclassics have brought back, right? So here we see the Greek architecture, that perfection of geometry, those stiff backs, right? Stiff spines. This is how a man is supposed to be. Women, super relaxed, comatose, do not have a voice, cannot speak, right? So, romanticism comes out now. Completely opposite. Romanticism goes, basically, you're crazy. You're crazy. You can't cut out your heart. You can't cut out God. You can't cut out nature. You're crazy. That's what romanticism comes out and says, right? So romanticism looks to the natural law as a source of truth, looks to commune with nature, right? So a lot of times when people hear romanticism, they think about love. They think about, oh, that's cute. No, romanticism also means, like, if you like to live in a mountain just surrounded by trees, you're a romantic, right? Romanticism, a key part to romanticism is believing that these men who have adopted the neoclassical war standard or have adopted this this rigid, unfeeling, emotionless attitude, that's who they really are. It's not honorable. It's not honorable to go out and just kill, because this is what these men become. These men become murderers. That's what these men become, right? So Romanticism initially starts out as a reaction against this super scientific reason man ideal, right? And this is what Romanticism produces. Right? Romanticism now goes, let's look at nature. Let's fall in love with nature. Right? Let's look to nature to get back in balance. Right? So they don't see, they're in love with all types of nature. They're in love with the chaos of nature. They're in love with the stillness of nature. But they also go out and they try to prove that nature is symmetrical. Prove that nature is ordered. It's balanced. Right? So you can go to God, you can go to, you need this to be balanced. That's a big part of what Romanticism does. So, and at a base level, that's good, that's great, right? But what Romanticism really, the offshoot of Romanticism is really where we start getting into a problem, which is exoticism, right? Through this idea that Jean-Jacques Rousseau brings up in the Social Contract, is basically man is inherently good. He comes up with this theory that we don't need laws, we don't need rules to tell us what to do, how to govern ourselves. People have been doing that for thousands of years. So let's get connected again. Let's get connected back to what that is. How do we do this? How do we get back to what our initial goodness, if you will, right? So he goes out, he says that basically private property is a problem, because that's when now you have to fight for that, right? So where is it now that we can see people living in harmony with nature that does not need these rules of Britain or wherever to govern them? Where is that? Where would that exist? Yes? Africa. Right. Africa, tribes people, right? So now we have an investigation into the savage that's now noble. It's now noble to be communing with nature without these laws. It's now noble to be this. So all of a sudden we start seeing random natives in paintings. That's what we start seeing. We start seeing random natives in paintings in European art. Now the question is, what is this native doing in this piece? What's he doing? Right? This is a painting by Benjamin West, right? We have this native here, right? Close to eye level, right? We know that this is the man that's important. Right? This is that with General Wolfe, right? We have the dark clouds moving away. We have the light of God coming down on him, right? We have the chalice, right? So, is this man a good man that's dying? Yes. Yes. This is a good man. How do we know that this is a good man?
Well, you're looking at people attending to him, and it looks like the noble savage is learning from saying the honor of this hero who's died.
Definitely. We have the respect of his peers, and we have the respect of nature. That's what he's doing here. That's what this native is doing here. This native is letting you know that this man is a good man. This is not about the importance of Native Americans. This is about nature proving how good this man is, or how good this man has become. And he's earned an honorable death. This is an honorable death that we're looking at here, right? So yes, so now we start seeing this influx of these native paintings, right? And it becomes a narrative. It becomes a popular narrative. It becomes a story that people want to see over and over and over again. Right? And through, I'm talking about romanticism, we're talking about people at this point in time, we're talking about people traveling all over the world, right? We're talking about traveling and experiencing different things, right? So we're looking at where the beginnings of these generalizations come from when it comes to really any indigenous people, not just black people, any indigenous people, right? We're considered more relaxed, more colorful, more sensual, depicted as lazy, unable to govern themselves, while those who aspire to European sophistication were often derided as spoiled, right? So now we start to get a picture of indigenous people from a Western standpoint, right? Which initially wanting to get back to God, wanting to get back to nature, that's a good thing. But now we start seeing a discourse